Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on the future of funding for school modernization and renovation, as well as for building new ones. I'm Louis Friedberg, Executive Director of EdSource.
And I'm John Fensterwald from EdSource.
We're pleased to offer this collaboration in this webinar in collaboration with PACE as part of the Getting Down to Facts collaboration. Well, as many of you know, 3 years ago, California passed Prop 51, which committed about $9 billion to help school districts and community colleges with the cost of modernizing and building new schools. But that money is now gone, either already out the door or committed to school districts. A bill sponsored by Assemblyman Patrick O'Donnell of Long Beach would put about $13 billion more in bond measures on the November ballot next year. O'Donnell's bill was approved by the Assembly last month and will be heard tomorrow morning in the Senate Education Committee. Why is this important? Research has concluded that conditions of school buildings can affect student health and academic performance. And to cite a recent study by the Harvard School of Public Health, schools in need of extensive repair can disadvantage students who already are struggling on a daily basis. The opposite of that is that new, clean, and well-designed buildings with meeting spaces that enhance learning can make students feel better about coming to school, and modern libraries and schools with space for health clinics and so on and parent centers are becoming vital community resources.
In the next hour, we'll explore California School Construction Program and Assembly Bill 48. We'll look at topics such as, is there a need for a new state bond? How does the system of matching state dollars with local bonds work? What's in Assembly Bill 48? Is the current formula working, and for whom? A study from the Getting Down to Facts research project, organized by the research nonprofit PACE and Stanford University, found that the system advantages higher income communities with the above average property values who can more easily afford local school bonds. The co-author of that study is on our panel today. We conducted an informal poll, and it's admittedly unscientific, of our email subscribers asking if they would support a bond measure. We had 347 responses. The results, 35% no, but 64% said yes. So let's meet our panel of experts. Nancy Chairez Espinoza is a legislative advocate at Murdoch, Walrath, and Holmes, where she represents the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. CASH is an organization advocating for sustainable funds for school facilities. Nancy is also a board member of the Elk Grove Unified School Board, which is the state's 5th largest district with 60,000 students. Eric Bakke has over 16 years of school facilities experience, including his current role as legislative advocate for the California School Boards Association, and before that, as LA Unified's legislative advocate representing school facilities. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
I meant to welcome you too, Nancy.
Welcome. Would you like me to get started? I wasn't sure if you got all the
Not quite. We just wanted to make sure our audience identified you with the voice, so thank you. We'll be right with you.
Thank you.
Jeff Vincent is co-founder and director of the Center for Cities and Schools at UC Berkeley and has studied public school finance for more than a decade. He's co-author of the study I referred to, which is Financing School Facilities in California, a 10-Year Perspective. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And Barbara Flores, who will be joining us by sound, is a professor emerita of education at Cal State Bernardino, and in her 3rd term on the board of San Bernardino Unified, which is the state's 9th largest district. And she has served as president of that board and past president of the California Latino School Boards Association. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much, and thank you for asking me to participate.
So Nancy, why don't you start us off and give us an overview of the state program and how it's been administered and why there is a need for another state bond.
First off, I want to tell you a little bit about what came before. And what existed before was a system based on local property taxes, and that obviously lends itself to some inequities. Since Prop 13 was passed in 1978, local jurisdictions, including school districts, have been very limited in their ability to collect local property taxes. So the state started passing state bonds in order to fund school facilities. The bonds in 82, 84, and 86 were based on a program where the state provided 100% of the funding for state school facilities. And the reason for that is because according to our state constitution, the state has an obligation to provide free schools to kids. And that's as true on the facility side as it is on the operations side. And in 1986, we got back as school districts the ability to put out local bonds, albeit at a 2/3 vote threshold, which is much higher than the present day rate. What happened over time is that with successive iterations of the program, the state lowered its contribution, meaning the share of the total cost of building schools that it was providing to us. So from Cash's perspective is that the state has really failed to meet its constitutional obligation to provide adequate school facilities for kids. I want to mention one thing that is true also about every iteration of the state school facilities program is that every time it's been recreated, it's been somewhat in response to the problems with the previous version, and that is also true with the current iteration of the program. So that's why we are always open to addressing the existing problems with the program. So what is the purpose of the state school facilities program? It's to provide funding, usually matching funding, to build new K-12 schools and to modernize existing schools. And I'll get into a little bit what exactly we mean by modernization. It has a very specific definition, but the primary programs, the most of the money goes to new construction and modernization. So new construction means you're building a new school because you have growing population in a certain area, or you have to add classrooms because, again, your population is growing in a certain area. But it also includes things like libraries, multi-purpose rooms, and gymnasiums. Modernization is a major overhaul of a building system to extend the life of the building. So it's a little bit more than a maintenance project per se. We're really talking about structural upgrades like accessibility, meaning ADA accessibility, compliance upgrades. Your HVAC system is 40 years old, your plumbing, lighting, electrical, things of that nature. So major building systems, which are very expensive to replace. I just want to remind the audience that the intensity of use in a public school is far beyond what most of us would encounter in our homes, for example. So you've got to keep in mind that most of these schools are used round the clock and around the year. So the wear and tear is pretty intense on these facilities. Really quickly, in addition to new construction and modernization, over the course of the last couple of decades, every time there has been a bond authorized by the legislature, they also have identified specific needs, and sometimes they will create specialized programs. So when the state instituted class size reduction in the lower grades, they identified that there would be a need for more facilities. So there was a pot of money set aside for class size reduction. Similar with seismic retrofit, charter schools, career technical education, things of that nature. So from time to time, these bonds include specialized programs like that. And when we get to AB 48, we're going to talk about what is included in AB 48 that would be included in the 2020 bond. Another aspect of the program that is pretty fundamental is the local match. So currently the local match is 50-50 for new construction and 60-40 for modernization, in where the state pays the higher share. Eligibility is determined in a couple of different ways. So for new construction, they count the number of students that you have and count the space that you have, right? They use a flat loading standard. How many kids should you be able to fit per classroom? And whatever you have left over, they deem unhoused. That's the eligibility you have. You have a specific grant per pupil, and you add those up, and hopefully you get to 25 and you can build a classroom. And for modernization, need is really determined based on the age of the building. So roughly every 25 years, your building has a birthday, and we determine that that's generally speaking when you are able to when you need to replace your major building systems. There's a couple of caveats to that, and those are financial hardship and facilities hardship. So in facility hardship, that's a kind of an emergency program that's available for health and safety issues, fire, flood, disaster. So that is an existing program and something that we intend to continue. Financial hardship exists for when the school district or county office of education cannot come up with its local match for whatever reason. And in that case, the state would pay up to 100% of the cost of the program. All county offices of education are qualified for financial hardship because they're not allowed to go out for bonds. So already all county offices of education are in, and some school districts qualify. Last couple of things I'll say on this slide, which is the fact that we have been reliant on bonds really since 1982 means that there's not a continuous source of funding for school facilities in California the way there is on the operational side, right? On the operational side, we wait to see what the state budget says every year, and then we can figure out how much our individual districts are going to get. We don't have that kind of continuity, and it's obviously something we would like with respect to school facilities. To date, this program, the State School Facilities Program, has authorized $42.3 billion in funding from the state to help local school districts build its facilities. Now, if you would go to the next slide, please. So I was asked to give a little bit of history as well. And here is a list of bonds since 1998. And I did choose this period because this is the current school facilities program that was authorized by SB 50 in 1998. And what I really want to be the takeaway from this is the fact that the $13 billion that is being proposed for a 2020 bond in AB 48 is really in line with the asks that have been made of the voters historically. If anything, it might even be a little low. And the way that we pick those numbers is a combination of things. It reflects the need that we're seeing. It reflects voter support, and it reflects, we want to make sure that we right size that amount so that it will arrive in just, when we're running out of money, and that that the state can get that money out in a reasonably short period of time. So not too soon, not too late. And unfortunately, in terms of status of Proposition 51, we are once again growing a backlog. So as Louis mentioned, the voters authorized $13 billion in Prop 51 in 2016. And it only took us a couple of years to get that out the door because there was already a backlog at the time. So we are once again, as of October, I think, we had more applications in hand than bond authority for new construction. And as of about February of this year, we were in the same position for modernization. We have, if you combine all of the applications in hand with bond authority and those that exceed bond authority, we have over $5 billion in demonstrated need. And applications are being submitted at an annual rate of about 600 million for new construction and twice that, 1.2 billion a year for modernization. So 30 years ago, we had about 7,000 schools, and now we have about 11,000, and they really need to be upgraded. By no means is the entire state in a condition of declining enrollment, but modernization is really the primary need that we're seeing. If you could go to the next slide, please. Excellent. So I'm going to start, and then in the next slide, I'll hand it off to my colleague, Eric Bakke. But just to give you a little overview of AB 48, which is a bill authorized by Assemblyman O'Donnell. And this is more than halfway through the legislative process, but still very much under development. So AB 48 would authorize two bonds, one in March of 2020 and one presumably in November of 2022. We know more about the first program, so I'm really going to focus on that 2020 bond, because for the second one, we have yet to determine what the amount will be, and the bond specifically leaves the program itself open. So the bond says that the 2022 second bond will be administered in accordance with the program at the time. And that is by design. That is because we are not done improving this program. We want to leave ourselves time to continue addressing a lot of the issues I'm sure we're going to discuss later on. But going back to 2020, As was stated earlier, it's a $13 billion bond. First off, $3 billion of that will go to community colleges, and that is something typical that we've seen sharing with our partners in community colleges, and $10 billion, which would go to preschool through 12th grade.
And Nancy, I just wanted you to clarify for the viewers that the legislature has to put this on the ballot, right? It has to go to the voters. That's how it works.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is a legislatively created bond. So passing the bill does not make the bonds happen.
And then just to clarify, then it requires 55% of a vote at the ballot box. Is that correct?
Oh my gosh, now I don't want to get it wrong.
I believe that's correct for a school bond measure.
So, I'm not sure about the state then.
But I'm going to ask you to hold any other thoughts, because I think we do want to go to Jeff.
No, to Eric.
To Eric. We're going to go to Eric Bucky, who is with the California School Boards Association. Thanks for that really informative presentation, Nancy Espinosa.
Sure thing.
Eric?
Hi, Louis. How are you today?
Good. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Here kind of provides you an overview of some of the issue areas that are being discussed in AB 48 right now. Some of the programs are new. Some of them are reinventions of some old programs that have, as my colleague Nancy had shown in some of the prior bonds, they're kind of coming back because the need starts to show a little bit as time goes on. I'll just quickly touch on each of these just to give you a brief understanding of what the proposals do. The first one is small district assistance. It's been shown over the last several years that small school districts need assistance in terms of accessing the program. There's just fundamental logistical issues being a small school district on the natural. So the state has recognized that that is an issue that needs to be addressed and is looking to provide advanced funding, staff assistance to provide outsource and resources for small school districts to participate. Financial hardship qualifying criteria, looking at increasing the thresholds by which to qualify for financial hardship. A lot of school districts have reached their caps in terms of indebtedness at the local level, and the need that they have far exceeds those caps. And so the conversation right now is looking at increasing the levels to provide greater participation in some of the lower wealth communities. Preschool facilities, as you've probably read and heard from our new governor, that early education is a priority. The conversation is really trying to work and provide funding for early education. Primarily the program has been K-12, but we're trying to look at how we can support our preschool programs at the early grade levels so that there's support systems built in there at the local school sites. Replacement of 75-year-old buildings. The program primarily, as Nancy said, focused on new construction, development of existing, the need for new schools, as well as modernization, which focuses on existing facilities. But the cost to renovate and repair existing facilities sometimes outpaces the amount of funding necessary. It could actually cause districts financial discomfort, if you want to say, when many of their deferred maintenance needs are paid through their general funds. So could we not have a long-term look or a lens in school facilities and see if whether or not some of our older, more aged facilities are probably better off being taken out of inventory and rebuilt? How should we look at that? Minimum essential facilities and joint use are old programs that are kind of coming back a little bit with some changes. Minimum essential facilities essentially means what are the basic buildings, infrastructure that's necessary at a school to operate? Things like your gymnasiums, multi-purpose rooms, libraries, things of that nature. A lot of times schools were built very quickly, and in some cases schools were really small.
And Jeff, I just had a question. One of our viewers, are kitchens involved, also included?
In minimum essential facilities?
Yes, or no, just in general?
They are. They're an eligible expenditure under the program for design. So if you say, for example, the kitchen in a high school would be different than that of, say, an elementary school where it's more of a warming state.
And another question, just so we get this in on the table from a viewer, is are charter schools also eligible?
I was just about to get to that.
Okay.
And the answer quickly is yes.
I see it's on your list there, yes.
Just right there at the bottom there, it's there. But again, minimum essential facilities is a way in which we can support the need of the basic infrastructure that's necessary to make a school run. Joint use is coming back. This is an issue that has been really raised at the community level. A lot of the problem with the prior program, it required that the local joint use partner, not the school district, but the partner contributed 25% of the facility's construction costs. Well, too many of our partners don't have the financing to provide that level of funding. So we're looking at trying to ease access so that we can provide greater community involvement in the construction of schools. And then testing and the remediation of lead in drinking water. I think a lot of us have read enough about this in the newspaper to know that it's important that we make sure that our schools are clean, safe, and healthy for our students. And we should be looking at ways in which we test to make sure our schools are safe, that our community understands that they're safe and have confidence that they're safe. And so it's really exciting to see a program like this come into the bond program.
Can I ask you a question about that, Eric? Because we've written a lot about that issue and what the standard would be for fixing the water. Would be the current federal standard, or would it, if it changes, could schools adapt to that?
Well, the current federal standard is lead cannot exceed 15 parts per billion in your drinking water. That's the national standard, which this program is seeking to strive for. I think there's a recognition that some school sites may exceed that. I believe that the Department of Water Resource Board is doing currently a study as a result of AB 746 last year to do sample testing on schools throughout the state that I believe is set to conclude sometime in July of this year. And the early results from that study show that the level of lead exceeding 15 parts per billion is extremely low. But yet it still exists, that still needs to be addressed. And so I'm excited to see that AB 48 is going to tackle that.
So now we're going to talk with Jeff Vincent, who is at UC Berkeley and has written an extensive paper on the Getting Down to Facts research initiative. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Louis. It's great to be here. And thanks, everybody, for this riveting discussion of school facility finance, right? Which is near and dear to my heart. But as Louis said, this is an issue that I've studied for, 10 to 15 years nationally, and particularly in California, and was the co-author on the Getting Down to Facts study that looked at school facility finance in California for the last 10 years, but we actually ended up looking at the last 20 years, because what's interesting about this point in time, we're in 2019, and as Nancy described, the school facility program in California started in 1998 as we know it. And it certainly had some changes and tweaks and evolution over time, but we kind of have 20 years of evidence about what's working, what might we want to improve. And so it's a good opportunity right now to do that. And I think Nancy's exactly right that we are continually learning from how it works and how it works on the ground and what's the state local partnership role. And so what I wanted to do was give just a little tidbit on some of the findings that we had from the study, particularly as they relate to moving forward and to kind of patterns of fairness for school districts accessing both local funds for their facilities, but also state funds in the state-local partnership. And I think, one thing to keep in mind is well, let me actually say that the paper that we did, the study that we did on facility finance here was done with my colleague, Eric Brunner, who's an economist at the University of Connecticut and studied California a lot, actually. But we took a comprehensive look at those 20 years of local spending and state monies and looked at the level of spending. And to Nancy's point, there's been a lot of volatility from year to year, as you can see in the report. But also then asked, how has it been distributed? Which school districts got which funds, and try to get our heads around that. And particularly, we looked at issues around property wealth and local household incomes, as well as shares of disadvantaged students in districts. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And we also did a pretty extensive overview of charter school facility finance. I think there was a question about that. So you can certainly look at the report to do that. But keep in mind, we were talking about these large dollar numbers, but keep in mind what we're talking about, which is, the students who are going to these schools every day. And I think people, I always forget how large of an inventory California has of school facilities. We have about 6 million students. We have, just under 1,000 school districts. And I think Nancy nailed it right. It's about almost 11,000 K-12 public schools. And my estimation is that that's about 550 million square feet of space to upkeep and to provide 21st century education. And those sit on land, right, which is about 125,000 acres, which is roughly the size of Lake Tahoe. And we don't know exactly how many of classrooms there are around the state, but we estimate there's a little over 300,000 classrooms. And I think what's important here, particularly, related to modernization, is understanding their ages. And here you can see kind of estimates of the ages. Our estimate in working with the California Department of Education to try to wrap our heads around this is that, easily 3/4 of the classrooms across the state are 25 years old. And you can see a good chunk are, over 50 years old and even over 70 years old. We do have thousands of portable classrooms across the state. And so these are the things that, school districts are trying to, make sure they're safe and healthy and educationally functional and serving students for a 21st century education. So I probably need pictures of children on this because we're actually, concerned about the children in them. But this is sort of the infrastructure that we're talking about. And to Nancy's point too, it gets real intense use. You think your house gets dirty and wear and tear. I mean, there are a lot of people in schools every day, not just children and students. Lots of community groups and others use them all the time. So they serve many purposes in their community. So, what we found in looking at the finances is that, we looked mainly at the new construction program and the modernization program and trying to understand kind of who got those funds. And what we found is that on the new construction side, as Nancy described, those funds go to local school districts that have growth, that have enrollment growth. And what we found is that those funds were more or less fairly evenly distributed following growth. And growth over the last 10 plus years has been experienced in both high wealth and low wealth districts. And those state monies largely followed those children as they should. But and actually, why don't you guys advance to the next slide? But what we found taking a look at the modernization program was a lot more problematic results. Before I get into that, let me just kind of give a quick overview. This is diving just a tad deeper than what Nancy provided, but you can see that, taking a look at the last 2 decades of school facility funding and spending in the state of California, what you find is that the most recent decades saw a shrinking of the overall pie, and in particularly a reduction in state aid. So from 1998 to 2006, the state aid was about 32% of the total capital spending by school districts. And what the decade after that, 2007 to 2015, state aid shrunk to about 19%. And part of that is, as Nancy's table showed before, there was 10 years between a school construction bond in 2006 and then 2016. So what that means is that the most recent decade has seen a greater reliance on local funds for school facility capital expenses, right? Going from 50% earlier to 65% in the last decade. So that was kind of our first finding, right? More reliance on local funds. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And then so like I said, the new construction dollars largely followed growth, and that growth was more or less evenly distributed across the state. That is from kind of high wealth and low wealth and middle wealth districts. But what raised concerns for us were the findings around the state's modernization program. And what we found was that over the last 20 years, so these dollars are 1998 to 2017, the modernization program dollars have gone disproportionately to wealthier districts. And so what this chart is showing, we've taken all school districts, so roughly 900 school districts, and grouped them into 5 groups or quintiles based on the amount of dollars that they received in modernization from the state. So the group on the left averaged $661 per student, while the group on the right averaged $5,361. So about 8 times as much as the lesser districts. And what you see, the numbers across the top of the bars are the average property values per student in those districts. And so there was a very clear pattern starting to emerge that the districts with the lowest property values on average in the state are getting fewer modernization dollars from the state. Right, so the first quintile has about $900,000 in property value on average per student, whereas the highest quintile of getting mod funds has $2.3 million per student. So now go ahead and advance to the next slide. So this is taking the same quintiles, right, the $661 per student all the way up to the $5,361 per student. But this is looking at the average share of disadvantaged students, and we use unduplicated percent for this. But you can see that the districts in the bottom 2 quintiles of receiving state modernization aid have significantly higher shares of unduplicated or disadvantaged students, right? 62 and 64% compared to 54% and 50% for the districts that got more money. And we did the same test with median household incomes and basically found the same pattern. That is, school districts in communities with higher median household incomes were getting more dollars from the state modernization program. And so this sent, kind of raised a red flag to us. Okay, something's going on here where lower property wealth districts, since there's a relation, well, we're seeing a relationship in the data between property values and the ability for school districts to pass bonds and then raise money with those bonds, of course, the bond amounts. And so we did some statistical testing in the paper with regression and found that, the strongest predictor of capital revenue, both at the local level and getting dollars from the state, was property values. So this has raised a big concern for us going forward around how do we ensure that districts with lower property values are able to raise local dollars and then participate in the state program to get that matching grant so that they can modernize their schools and, of course, build new schools when they need to. So why don't you go to the next slide? And so, of course, why do we ultimately care about these funds? I think Lewis or John mentioned it, but, school facilities do matter, and there is a growing body of literature that does, that's trying to understand this relationship and does see, a relationship between, the fact that poor quality school facilities certainly can negatively impact school climate, teacher retention and effectiveness, student health, student achievement, and overall measures of school quality. And I think Lewis mentioned some of the work that Harvard School of Public Health has done on this. But I would point folks who want to kind of dig into more details, some recent studies from some of my colleagues here at Berkeley and elsewhere on Los Angeles Unified and what they've seen.
I wanted to turn to, and we want to circle back and discuss this issue. It's really important what you raised, Jeff. First, we want to hear from Barbara Flores.
I've been listening to everyone's presentation, and I'm going to speak from a school board member's perspective from San Bernardino City Unified School District, but also as the past president of California Latino School Boards Association. And we think that what Jeff has said, what Nancy has said, Eric has said, is very, very important. Of course, I'm on the ground as a school board member, and I have to say that the urgency for facilities funding is very important. The issue of inequitable distribution of facilities funding for lower property wealth income districts and low income children of color specifically is paramount. And currently we're having issues as well because the fund is withholding facilities money as well. So we support the bond issues. However, we would like to have the data that has been presented to come up with equitable formulas for distribution to address this. San Bernardino City Unified has 76 schools, and we have a modernization plan, but we're stymied by the lack of funds. And we actually had to borrow money because we didn't get our facilities money in so far. And it's a big issue. I spoke to a couple of superintendents, and we have dilapidated classrooms. We have air conditioning infrastructure, plumbing, roofs, modernization. People have portables, and it's not a good thing. A lot of districts can't pass bonding. In my district 16, I'm a delegate assembly member. It's San Bernardino County. My colleagues, board member colleagues, have expressed from rural districts that they do not qualify for funding. Up in Williams, California as well, it's a very small rural district. They've been categorized as suburban, which clearly they're not. They're rural, so we have to address that as well. And lastly, I just want to say that every student should have access to adequate school housing regardless of their economic background. And I am so happy that EdSource has put this podcast together. I think we need to have other podcasts so that we can address all the data that we're getting that Jeff shared, and come up with a plan or several plans to present to our legislators so that they will move forward and provide the funding that we need in our school districts.
Thank you, Barbara. We want to get back to, I want to get the reaction from other panelists to Jeff's studies, to his study. But first, I want to address the issue of first come, first serve, because that is the basis for distributing bond money. And that's been raised as a problem for smaller and rural districts. And I wonder, first, if anyone could say, why is it first come, first serve? What value is that? And how can we deal with those districts that may not have the permanent staff that other districts have that would maybe enable them to jump higher in line? If anyone wants to take that.
I'd be happy to address that, John. And it's a relatively easy answer. The program is not first come, first serve. There's not a mechanism by which you get in line and then get funded in that order. You actually have to meet the eligibility criteria. So it's what I described at the top of the proposal. So for new construction, you have unhoused pupils, or for modernization, you have, dependent on the age of the buildings. So you have to meet those eligibility criteria before you can submit an application. So it's actually not first come, first serve. The gatekeeper is the eligibility set forth in statute. But I will say that just based on our experience with this program, we have identified issues, particularly for small districts, in getting to that gate in the first place. So that's one of the things that we are trying to improve upon in AB 48. We've created some project management grants to help those superintendent / principals / bus drivers have some professional assistance. We've created a preliminary apportionment so that they know what they're getting and their money is set aside for up to 5 years. The bill would also create an office of kind of a technical assistance dedicated towards those smaller school districts. So there's a lot we're trying to do to help people just even get to that starting gate.
Who's eligible for hardship, and is it broad enough to deal with the districts that really can't afford to raise a bond?
Yeah, financial hardship is provided currently to school districts that just don't have access to local bond funds to participate in the program. And a lot of that is stipulated in statute and through the regulations. So it's a small percentage of the school districts that actually do qualify for financial hardship. I think what we're seeing over the course of the program, it hasn't been adjusted since 1998. And I think what AB 48 is doing is recognizing that those dollars that are the threshold, so to speak, haven't been moved, and they need to be moved. because the need is there, and more districts are finding that they're not able to participate because of those thresholds. So we're excited to see that they're actually doubling the thresholds of $5 million to $10 million. And that should hopefully open the door for more school districts to participate.
Just a point of clarification, one of our readers has clarified that for a statewide bond measure, it's a simple majority. The local bond measure requires the 55%. So I'm glad we clarified that. And a question we got was also, are special education facilities eligible for funding? I imagine they are.
Yes, they are. They're considered part of the regular responsibility that the state has to students. So you build your special education facilities along with all of your other classrooms. They are a little bit more specialized. They are a little bit more expensive, but there's not a special program to address those needs.
I would add just that they do receive an additional funding level different than your traditional, elementary, middle, or high school student.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions, very current, is should there be an analysis and consideration of districts likely to be impacted by climate change and those at higher risk of devastating fires and rising sea levels? And what kind of funding would there be for retrofitting to minimize the damage? I'm sure this is something many school districts are dealing with. Jeff, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Obviously, with the fires last summer, impacted a number of schools. Let's hope we don't have that same story this year. But I think this issue of climate resiliency going forward for schools, I mean, we have schools certainly that don't have HVAC or appropriate HVAC to accommodate, rising temperatures, of course, flooding and all these things. I mean, I think it's a great question because, the K-12 facility, K-12 capital funding, in my opinion, has been kind of it sort of sits alone in the state's profile of infrastructure funding, and it really hasn't been connected to those issues in a concerted way to say prioritize schools that might be most vulnerable. So the question is, do we know which schools are most vulnerable to what we're seeing around climate change? And I think, we have some answers around that, but I think we'd have to do some analysis on that. The state has some idea, but then you'd have to say, okay, within the school facility program, is there some set aside for schools that are elevated in risk, or is that a whole different program? And I think that's a question for state leaders.
So
add some information to that, John. So there's not anything really in the school facilities program itself, but there is in the building code, particularly the portion we call the green building code. And that's really where schools are incorporated into the state's overall goals to reach zero net energy. So some changes have already been incorporated into the way we have to build schools going forward, or the way we have to modernize them. But there's definitely more work to be done. My colleagues in the School Energy Coalition are definitely trying to advocate for more resources for resiliency, wildfire resiliency, natural disasters, but also, healthy schools, as Eric mentioned, all of that is really interrelated. And I want to second Jeff's point that this is kind of a multi-jurisdictional issue, and we have some work to do to kind of incorporate schools into the broader plan.
So the last bond, I believe 51 was, I believe 50% of the money went to new construction and 50% went to renovation and modernization. Given the fact that the school student population is kind of flat and some areas declining somewhat, would you expect more money would be for modernization in this next bond?
I would hope that would be the case. When you look at the Department of Finance they do an annual review of projected enrollment. Depending on the time of year, it's anywhere from 1% to 2% growth, maybe even flatlined over the next decade. So I think we would want to see from the School Boards Association an investment on the existing facilities. While we do recognize new construction is an important element because there are pockets throughout the state that do have growth even today, I think it's still important to recognize that a large percentage, a significant percentage of our facilities are existing. And if we're going to attend to the needs and make sure that they're safe and clean, we need to make sure that there's enough resources to support those buildings.
I want to get back to, go ahead.
I would second that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify my earlier statement when I talked about the split of the $10 and $3 billion in AB 48. I should clarify that those numbers are not in AB 48 yet, and the reason it's relevant to this question is that as the discussion stands right now, the intention is to put twice as much money towards modernization compared to new construction. But I think the authors really want to see how the conversation plays out in the Senate Education Committee and going forward. So that is where the discussion is heading right now, but those numbers are not in AB 48 yet.
No, thank you for clarifying. Is there any sense of where Governor Newsom stands on this bond? A silence.
While you ponder that, and just like, just get a 30-second response. We did want some clarification, Liz Gillen, about this first come, first serve. I think we all thought it was first come, first serve. She says, once you met the eligibility criteria, is it first come, first serve? Because,
well, I would say one thing about that, and Nancy can chime in.
Yeah.
I would definitely say we have a first come, first serve system, having studied it for many years. If you get your eligibility, certified yesterday and I get mine certified tomorrow, you're probably going to get in line before I. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple of steps there with the getting your eligibility, but then you've got to then put your application into the state. Lots of steps involved in doing that, certainly. So I would say at that point, it is a first come, first serve kind of a thing. And what we have found looking, in our research to the point of kind of small and rural districts, many of which tend to be small, but not all of them, is that we have found that they do have some disadvantage in terms of both accessing local funds and accessing state funds. And so the question is why? We have some hunches on why that is, but we need to understand that better. And then when you know that answer, okay, what can the state do to help small districts? And so there's a lot to like in AB 48. I'd like the language around helping smalls because we've done a couple studies that have certainly showed small districts are at a disadvantage. I'm looking forward to seeing more concrete language in AB 48 around exactly what is that technical assistance.
So I'd like the other panelists to talk about the findings in your study, Jeff. Are they credible to you? And if so, does it deserve really addressing either in this next bond, AB 48, or 2022, and perhaps not as Jeff's prescribed it, but how would you then deal with that issue of the disparities based on wealth and property values?
Sure, right. I'll start. First off, I want to say that we really appreciate Dr. Vincent's work. He's made great contributions in this field. But in terms of the ideas being put forth in this latest report, I think I feel that they are incorrect, incomplete. And by I mean, I really think here I'm representing not just my organization, the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, but really this was the feeling of the majority of the individuals and the groups represented in the AB 48 working group. So just to give your audience a little bit of a background, in the development of this bond bill, we have been meeting just about every week since the fall, and prior to that, Cash convened a group for several months to talk about the future of the state school facilities program. So there's been a lot of thinking about how to improve this program, and AB 48 by no means represents the conclusion of that work. But what we really need to see is just a little bit more development of these ideas, because we weren't able to kind of connect the dots to get to where Dr. Vincent got. So for example, those rankings of students and districts by assessed valuation, we think there's a lot that's not accounted for there. It is a discrete 10-year window, so it really accounts for a bond that's 12 years old now. It doesn't account for what's been done and what's in the pipeline with AB 51. And looking only at assessed valuation really negates a lot of really important factors. For example, there are basic aid districts, there are our general definition of wealthy districts with really high numbers, 70, 80, 94% of students on free and reduced price lunch. And that is our usual poverty indicator in education. So what is left to really show is how the methodologies proposed by Dr. Vincent would address the problems that he's talking about. So there are a number of proposals out there, but they just really need to be vetted. We need to make sure that there are no unintended consequences.
All right, thank you. Eric, did Jeff's study raise any red flags for you as to what to do?
Thank you. No, it does raise red flags for us. I think what we want to be able to understand more is how does it impact individual school districts in terms of their participation in the program. I think what Jeff has done is opened up the idea that the problem exists. We need to now just spend the time exploring that problem, determining the effect it has, where we can find solutions. But at a minimum, I think what Jeff has done is said to us, not every school district is treated equally. Not every community is treated equally. And access may be limited due to their location. And if that's the case, we should look into that. You know, I think it's our duty, you know, as the folks that are representing our individual members to serve their purpose. And their purpose right now is to serve their kids. And if we're not participating in that conversation, then we're missing a great opportunity. So I'm not going to close the door on anything or cause any problems. I think what we want to try to do is learn more and spend the time to do so.
Jeff, what would you care to react to that? But also, how would you like the bill to at least address the issues that you've raised? If not 2020, then 2022.
And Jeff, if you could just give a 2-minute response, we want to get in a few more questions before we run out of time.
I'll aim for 90 seconds.
Thank you.
Having studied this issue nationally with various partners and looked at a lot of states, I would say a truism in the United States of America is public school facility finance is the most regressive element of public school funding. And I would say that our analysis of California suggests that that may have some truth here, particularly with regard to upgrading and renovating or modernizing existing public schools. So given what we've found, I think the state needs to think about, okay, how do we fix that? So they're raising the threshold for hardship. In my opinion, that seems good. The question is, how many districts is that actually going to help? They're offering, there's language in there to offer assistance to small districts below 2,500 students. This, based on our data and evidence, seems like a great thing to do because there's some burden or some hardship there. So I think that, you know, looking at other states, what a lot of other states do is actually have kind of a, to put it loosely, a sort of LCFF style approach that is a sliding scale of funding on the capital side. That's one option. There's a variety of options, but I think that this conversation with AB 48 needs to keep going forward in terms of, you know, what's an appropriate and fair system given evolving needs on the ground for having all our children in, you know, good quality facilities each day.
I infer from the silence to my previous question as to Governor Newsom that he who has not been heard from may have a say. Actually, I'm assuming there's still negotiation to occur on AB 48 as to what its final form will look like. Is that a correct assumption?
That's a correct assumption, John. And, you know, the silence, I think, was the fact that none of us want to get ahead of our skis and speak for the governor when he has not spoken officially on this yet. What we take as positive indications is the fact that this governor endorsed the last school facilities bond, Proposition 51. He also, in his first budget that he proposed as governor, increased the amount of state bonds being sold for the school facilities program out of Prop 51 every year. So we take those as positive indications. And yes, really, we are kind of sitting back and waiting for the negotiations that we expect will happen between legislative leaders, the author of the bill, and the governor's office.
So question from Tom McCloskey, talking about the governor. Is any talk of using all our the state surplus of $22 billion for construction instead of the state incurring more debt? 30-second response from. So
Cash actually has a proposal that is not for the near term, but really for farther out. to get us off of this bond funding dependence and to try to start buying down the debt service and to start using general fund to forward fund facilities. So the short answer is no, there is not a proposal currently, but we do envision in the longer term using these 2020 and 2022 bonds as a bridge to hopefully get us to a mechanism where we have stable, predictable, dedicated funding.
Yeah,
Yep.
and to piggyback on that, I would add we're one of the very few states, if the only state in the country, that funds this at the state level exclusively from general obligation bonds.
Yep. Barbara, we can't see you, but we'd love to hear from you if you have another thought to share with us.
Well, I concur with Nancy and Eric that we have to look into what Dr. Vincent has done. He's clearly showed that there's disparity, but we have to have all components, everyone talking with each other, and because the bottom line are our kids, and the bottom line is, you know, access to adequate school housing funding, and so we as the adults have to work together and come up with viable solutions. And like Nancy said, what are the consequences if we do this, or that? And as a school board member, you know, I visit schools and I see things that need to be done. I was in a middle school and I asked the middle school kids, what are the 3 things that you would like improved in your schools? You know what number 1 was? Clean water. Could you please clean our bathrooms? Our bathrooms need to be upgraded. Our water fountains need to be upgraded. We would like water. That was number 1. And so number 2, the kids were presented the other day about how they wanted, you know, to have more facilities, adequate facilities for their multi-purpose rooms where they could eat in a comfortable, you know, shaded area. So, I mean, there's lots of needs everywhere. And we have this opportunity with, in 2020 and 2022 with the state bonds. And hopefully, you know, we all work in concert with each other and come up with the best policies that will help our kids in our school districts.
Well, thank you so much. We've actually now run out of time, and want to thank the panelists and for those of you who tuned in for a really interesting conversation on an admittedly often complex topic. For those of you who want to follow our reporting on this issue and many others, you can sign up for our daily email at edsource.org. We would really like your feedback. There will be a very brief survey on your screen when you leave the webinar, so it'll just take you a couple of minutes to provide input on today's discussion. So, and remember, there's a hearing tomorrow. That's Wednesday, June 19th, on this AB Assembly Bill 48. So those of you can see how this, this measure fares. Thank you for joining us.
So thank our panelists, Nancy, Eric, Jeff, and Barbara. We hope to continue this dialogue over the next year and beyond. It's a really important issue, and we appreciate your participation today.
And we did get quite a few questions, which we weren't able to get to. So we're going to see if we can respond to these and get answers back to those of you who are listening or watching us. Thanks for joining us, and have a great summer.